I found a journal with the world's secret inside. We're our own worst enemy. Written by ReeseC. I stared into the mirror, watching myself closely. Could I be imagining? I thought to myself. No way. I repositioned, watching every movement of my reflection carefully. It matched me perfectly. Nothing was off center. The slight wrinkles in my shirt, the subtle twitch of my eyes I focused in, even the elevation of my chest as I breathed. Everything was fine. For now. My name is William, and I'm writing to you this as a warning. Something from my childhood has resurfaced, and it's not isolated just to me. I'm not sure how the process works or how much danger we're truly in, but they're here, waiting to emerge at any moment. Every generation, Earth underwent a cycle to keep it healthy and cleanse itself of humanity's mistakes. It used to, at least. That might not make sense now, but just trust me. I've been trying to piece it together for years, trying to figure out what I'd heard and saw that day. I'll tell you all of what's going on, but maybe I should start from the beginning. Bear with me and listen to everything I say with an open mind, and maybe you can know too if they're already close to you. When I was younger, my older brother was taken. Okay, maybe taken isn't the right word. He ran away from home for a few weeks. The day that he left, I was there, and I saw something. I don't think I was supposed to see it, and to be honest, I think my life would be a lot better if I hadn't. But I did. My brother and I really didn't have a relationship once he got to high school. When he was a freshman, I was in 5th grade. We didn't have a particularly great relationship beforehand, but it was definitely better. Every now and then he would come into my room to wrestle or play with my game system, but that all stopped. The change he'd undergone all started when he met this older guy from school, Kelly. I didn't know much about him then, and there's still the case now. I did know, however, that this guy was bad news, even for my adolescent mind. Kelly had a few tattoos on his arm, and one under his eye on his cheek. He always wore dark clothes. He had dark hair, so dark that it looked to have been dyed. I vaguely remember him having black eyes, but I think that's just my imagination taking over a bit. I didn't recognize the symbol or whatever that tattoo was on his arm or face. Not back then. Kelly was a bit strange, and he had made me uncomfortable plenty of times in the past. One time he came over, and my parents told him that my brother and I were upstairs. Instead of walking to my brother's room, he walked into mine and stood in the doorway. We made eye contact for a few seconds before I initiated the conversation with an awkward, "Hey, Kelly." He let out a small smirk and tilted his head as he walked over to where I was sitting. He squatted down and placed his hands on both sides of my face. I just stared at him, shaken but not trying to show it. He squeezed my face harder, focusing in on something. "I don't think he's ready yet," he spoke. I looked at him, about to ask him who he was talking to, before my brother came into the room laughing. "Yeah, I told you he's young, and I don't want him hanging around with us anyway." Kelly let go of my face and stood up, smiling once again. As he walked out of the room and past my brother looked back at me, slightly concerned. He just let out a smile and nodded his head before closing my door. I never thought about it much back then. I just thought Kelly was a creep, and most high schoolers started acting like that away eventually. Something told me that he wasn't talking to my brother that day at all, and I still believe he wasn't. Anyways, our parents worked late most of the time, and my brother would watch me after school. They wouldn't get home till 6 or 7 at night, so we were there alone for several hours at a time. We used to be, that is. On the morning of my last day of school, I'd gotten off at the bus stop to find that my brother wasn't there. This necessarily wasn't a big deal, but it was still kind of weird. My brother was usually very responsible, even during his downward spiral after meeting Kelly. Anyways, our house was visible from the bus stop, and we lived in a pretty safe neighborhood. Him meeting me there was just a safety precaution our parents put together. I was sure he had just lost track of time. He probably didn't even know it was a half day for us since he had been out of school the whole week prior. So I took it upon myself to walk the rest of the way alone. As I had gotten closer to my house, I could see there was a car parked in our yard that didn't belong to our parents. I slowed my pace as the car door swung open. Getting out of the driver's seat was Kelly. I felt relieved, as much as I could anyway, and I picked my speed back up to a regular walk. Kelly was ringing the doorbell when suddenly all 3 of the other doors opened on the car. I stopped completely in my tracks. Once I saw the rest of the people come out of the car, I ducked off into a bush so they didn't see me. They all walked up to my front door, looking around anxiously as they did. I hadn't seen my brother come outside yet. I didn't even know if he was there. I would be damned if I walked up to that house without knowing what was going on. I waited behind that bush as they all stood in front of my door for another minute or so. Finally, the door opened, and I can only assume that my brother was the one that opened it. However, I still stayed out of sight until they were all in. Through the leaves, I could see the last person looking behind him before he closed the door. However, when he turned around, I saw him. He had that same symbol that Kelly had on his face, but on his neck. I immediately felt my stomach knot a bit. I don't exactly know why. I thought maybe this was just some kind of weird, gothic cult. Maybe they worship the devil and were trying to get my brother to join them. My young mind started to wander off, as young minds often do, but I snapped out of it. Honestly though, I would come to find out that a cult would have been a lot less threatening than the truth. As soon as the door closed all of the way, I made a full sprint to my house. I snuck around the side to see if I could sneak a peek, but the blinds were just barely open. I looked inside and saw that my brother was staring into the mirror that's on the wall of our living room. I could also hear them talking, very faintly. I heard the girl ask him if he was ready to come through and accept his goal. As she said this, my brother started to put his hands on his head and scream. Those screams though, something was off about them. My brother's voice was deeper than it normally was, and it scared me enough that I fell on my back as he let it out. As I mentioned earlier, I was young, but not so young I wasn't aware of the weird shit the world has to offer. I didn't know at the time what exactly he was accepting, but I knew it couldn't be any good. I had to think quickly, and what I did was quick indeed. I banged as hard as I could on the window I was sitting under. I immediately saw them turning as I ducked back down, and I took off at full speed to my backyard. We lived in the city limits, in a gated community, but ours was special. Behind everyone's house on my side of the road, there was a humongous wooded area. I didn't have many hiding places in my backyard, not enough to hide from a group of people at least. I figured my best bet was to make a break for the woods instead of the street. I knew that all of the adults were at work. I had to keep running. I assumed that all of those people were in high school, and they could catch up to me easily if I let up. I didn't hear anyone behind me at first. I kept running though. I stopped after about 2 or so minutes of running to catch my breath. I sat down behind a tree and took the colored shirt that had been over my t-shirt off. I was admittedly tired, but not exhausted, but tired. Just as my breathing began to slow down to normal, I heard twigs breaking behind me. I held my breath and tried to stay as still as humanly possible. "There isn't anyone back here," I heard the girl from earlier say. "Yeah, I don't think so either. Maybe it was just a bird that hit the window," said a male voice. They walked a bit more until they're directly behind the tree I was sitting beside. "So, what do you think is taking him so long? The rest of us got over here so easy," the male asked. The girl didn't say anything, not that I could hear at least. "I mean, I killed this version of myself easier than I thought I could," the male continued. The female finally responded, "Don't you find that a bit weird though?" "Find what weird?" "How long is this taking, Mott? I know he's soft, but man, also, right as he's about to come through, something hit the window. That wasn't a bird. Somebody heard us. This could ruin everything if anyone found out," she said. At this point, I was terrified, and I had many questions. Did this guy kill someone? Who's Mott? What could be ruined, and who are these people? I really wanted to catch a glance of the girl to see if I recognized her from somewhere, or if she had that symbol on her, but I didn't know if they were facing my direction or not. I was too scared to move a muscle, but I had to try. I'd regained enough energy that by then if I had to run, I could. I waited until I heard the footsteps, that they were going in the opposite direction. Now was my chance. I slowly, very slowly peeked my head around the tree. I could see a little sliver of the other side. I could see her, on her arm, that same symbol, but this time I could see it more vividly. It was a circle of some sort, a circle with an X going through it. But it's not a tattoo, it's like a marking or a brand or something. Also, hers was a bit more stretched out than Kelly's, as it covered most of her arm. As soon as my mind processed that, I carefully turned my head back around the corner. I had to get back to my brother, to warn him that they could be, no, that they were planning something bad. If I ran around back, they would beat me to him, and he could be in trouble. If I ran past them, they would catch me and we both could be. I had to quickly think again, quicker. I let out a sigh and stood up and walked back the way I came. I could see them up ahead, so I slowed down. They hadn't heard me yet. I looked around and saw a small opening in the thicket that I used to climb in while I was playing hide and seek. Even for my age, I was a fairly small kid, so I had the reputation of being the best hider in the neighborhood when we played our beloved game. It's been a few weeks, but I was sure I could still fit in it. It led to another opening that would give me the head start I needed to make it back to my house. I looked back and forth for a few seconds to map out the plan. I had to make sure it was enough distance between me and them so that I wouldn't get caught before it even had made it to the crawl space. I waited, and with each passing second, I grew more and more nervous. After about 10 seconds, I yelled at the top of my lungs and ran towards the opening. I heard their footsteps stomping behind me. Shit! I looked over my shoulder, and they were already turned the corner and were directly behind me. As soon as I reached the crawl space, I fell down and used every ounce of my strength to pull myself through it. Behind me, I could hear the leaves shake as they tried to reach for me. At one point, I think one of them grabbed me. I barely made it. Once I got out of the other end, I ran to my house and could still see the car parked in my yard. There was still time. I crept quietly, but quickly. There was no way I could know where Kelly was, and it wouldn't be long before the ones behind me had caught up. I quietly yelled for my brother, "Tom! Tom! Where are you?" I got no response. I looked up the stairs and saw the shadow of someone walking by. It had to be Kelly. I felt that though my brother would protect me if Kelly tried something, so I rushed up the stairs as fast as possible, trying to warn Tom that these guys were up to something. Tom! Tom! These guys killed someone. I heard them say it, and they're trying to get you to..." I stopped, dead in my tracks, as I saw an image I can't forget to this day. My brother was looking at his reflection in the mirror, but his reflection was alive. It was moving and twitching, and he wasn't. I couldn't get any more words out of my mouth. I was silent, not even caring about Kelly or those goons anymore. I walked closer to my brother, trying to pull him away from the mirror, but as I got close to him, that same scream from earlier came back. This time it felt like my head was going to explode from how deep the screams were. I fell to my knees and covered my ears, but it didn't help. Eventually, I ran out of the room, still covering my ears, trying to make it down the steps, but I collapsed. And that's all I remember. Fast forward a few hours, and my parents came home and found me on the ground. They had called an ambulance, and I awoke in the hospital. They said they were calling the house and my brother's cell phone, but weren't getting an answer, so they came home. And that's when they found me. They asked me about Tom and if I had seen him, but I couldn't tell them what I saw. They wouldn't believe me. So I just told them no, and that when I'd come home, he wasn't there, and I must have fainted or something. They told me they had already contacted the police because the door was wide open and Tom's mirror was broken. They asked me if I had remembered anyone being at the house, and I was about to tell them that I had saw Kelly, but I figured that would put me and them in danger, so I just said no. Fast forward a few weeks later into that summer, and my parents were sitting in the living room, and I was in my room when the doorbell rang. I slowly walked down the stairs as I heard my parents scream, and at the door was Tom. He was back. As my parents hugged him, I arrived at the bottom of the stairs, and he looked at me with a small smirk. But something was up. He was different, and the energy I felt when he came back was unlike any I'd ever felt before, even with Kelly. Then I remembered that day, what I saw with the mirrors, and his face the reflection made, that exact face, and I knew things were never going to be the same again. In the years to come, my brother stayed in trouble with the law. Drugs, guns, fights, everything you could think of he's done. I moved to stay with my grandparents. I came up with an excuse about wanting to spend time with them, which wasn't a lie, but the truth is that I didn't want to live in the house with Tom, or whatever I saw that day. My parents have always known that I saw something though, from that day in the hospital. Well, here we are now, in current time, and my brother has passed away. To be blunter, he took his own life. I'm 18 now and in college, coming home early for his funeral. When I arrived home, my parents told me to just go up to my own bedroom. Everything is the same. I realized then that I hadn't revisited the house much, if at all, in the last few years. They had always come to visit me. I kind of felt bad, especially seeing the smile on their faces as they finally had their last remaining son home. As I was walking up to my room, my parents told me one last thing. "Oh, William, we found your journal and put it on your bed," my dad said to me. I looked down at him with confusion, and he let out a laugh. "Oh, don't worry, we didn't look at it at all. I promise, we've always respected your boys' privacy, and we always will." I just smiled a bit and continued walking up the stairs. My journal. I know I haven't been here since I was a child, but everything of importance to me I took with me. I never had a journal. I didn't have any books. I wasn't much of a reader back then. I walked past my brother's room, not even giving it a slight glance, and continued to my bedroom at the end of the hall. Upon arriving, the first thing I noticed was the huge, red, decrepit-looking book lying on my bed. On the book cover, it said, "William," in all caps. This is when I learned everything, and where you need to listen to everything I'm about to say. I'm sorry for so much background, but everything I remembered from that day is starting to make sense, and I knew it wasn't my imagination. Please, if you're reading this, pass this on to everyone you can. I have to type faster. My reflection is starting to move on its own on my computer screen. My brother, and whatever replaced my brother, left me this journal to try and tell everyone I could about what is happening and what has been happening in front of us our whole lives. I can't quote everything word for word, I don't have the time, but I can tell you I think what everything means. My brother was indeed replaced. My real brother died that day in front of the mirror. Whatever came back, his doppelganger essentially, was not him. However, what came back was also not completely evil either, which is why he struggled so much more to come through than the rest of his replacements. My brother's heart was pure, leaving his replacement in a weakened state, weak enough to allow parts of Tom's real self to warn me about this and keep it hidden from the replacement. Every generation, Earth starts a cycle to cleanse itself of humanity. We've heard this story for years in all kinds of different forms, Noah's Ark being one of them. It had been this way since the beginning of mankind, but as humanity evolved mentally, the cycle weakened more and more. Humanity started to take notice of these events and has tried to prevent them from happening as much as it could. This negativity, this vengeance that humanity has for years created sort of an alternate Earth, where the people have lived without cleansing. The flood, the asteroids, none of that has happened there. That gravity of hate was so strong that it has manifested itself into a physical form almost. Our Earth is slowly being taken over by this alternate one, and our alternate selves are starting to take over us, which is what happened to my brother that day. This alternate Earth, we'll call it Echo, has been seeping into our entire lives. The symbols I mentioned earlier are proof of that. Kelly, the girl, the guy, all had the same symbol, and most likely you do too. However, for you, it's most likely in the form of a birthmark, faded away through the essence of space-time to the point where it's not recognizable anymore. You were born into this Earth, this in-between Earth that's slowly being taken over by the Echo. Your birthmark, or that Echo mark, are either fading away or coming into itself. I'm not sure. My brother really never specified which way it worked. When Kelly grabbed my face that day, I was correct. He wasn't talking to my brother. He was somehow talking to my Echo through me. If you were to tell someone anything like that, you'd be called mentally insane, which is probably how they've masked this secret for so long. People who find out are either dead, replaced, or kept locked away. Remember Mott? Well, I figured out who that was as well. That's just my brother's name backwards. That's his Echo's name. We humans have this strange phenomenon known as deja vu, which is a scenario in which we remember things, usually that haven't happened to us. I think this is just us having a glimpse of our Echo's lives as we live ours. Echo is a copy of Earth, no doubt about that, but we don't live the same lives as our Echoes exactly. There are a few contingencies scattered about to differentiate us. Have you ever glanced at a mirror and it looked like your reflection was just slightly out of place? Well, you probably weren't imagining it. These echoes of us can only take over us by looking at our reflections. It's a tricky process, I'll try to explain. Echo is a world without cleansing, and a world full of hate. These people are the worst versions of us imaginable, but they are still us. Every time we look at our reflection, we're looking at them, and they're looking back at us, slowly taking us over. There's an old wives' tale about staring at yourself too long in the mirror. Apparently if you do, your face starts to distort. That's not an illusion, or your brain playing tricks on you. That's your Echo trying to fight its way into you. Ever heard of Bloody Mary? Another urban legend revolving around a demon in the mirror? That's no demon. That's you. That's us. All of us. Humanity seems to get worse by the year. Crime goes up as time goes on, and it's not our fault. Echo is slowly but surely winning this war. It's only a matter of time before the dust is settled. According to my brother's notes, if you learn about this secret, your Echo becomes more active. My reflection has been acting up all day today, so I believe it. I'm still spreading the word. It's better to be prepared and know what's happening, so maybe there can be a way to fight it. I'm seeing it now, my reflection. It's definitely not matching me as much as I thought it was earlier. I have to post this now. If you see this post, please know that there's something evil on Earth, something that lives in each inside of every one of us. Our Earth, our original selves. We were pure. Unfortunately, we stood no chance of the evils that were out there, and the evil is starting to take over us here. Everyone, watch your reflection, please. My brother was strong enough to weaken his Echo, so he still had some good left in him, but not everyone will be that lucky. Watch your loved ones. Look for signs of their behavior changing suddenly. Watch for the mark. I know many won't see this, but just as people figured a way to let the echo take over, if we band together, we can find a way to stop it for good. It might take years, decades, centuries, but I know we can stop it. We must.